Hello, welcome everyone to the next episode of the Michael&Harrison podcast. I am your host, Harrison, and this is your co-host, Michael. And,
Hello.
yes. So this week, we'll be talking about so many things. From the college admission scandal, to the Boeing crashes, to the massacre that's happened in New Zealand. So, Michael, I think first of all, since it's college acceptance season, why don't we start off with college acceptances, like the scandal that's behind it, and why don't you explain to the viewers, well, what's going on and why there's a big scandal?
Well, so basically what happened is that federal prosecutors busted a bunch of people for basically bribing people at colleges and also cheating more or less to get their way to college. This involves uh, basically making up SAT scores by having someone else take the test for them, and B, bribing coaches to designate them as as an athletic recruit even though they never played the sport before.
Hmm. Now, out of I know this is a bunch of celebrities who have done this and like CEOs and stuff. So, who exactly are these people who have participated in this non-moral action?
Wasn't it like there's like two Hollywood celebrities and a bunch of hedge fund CEOs and the like?
Hmm. I see. And so, what do you think about this sort of scandal that's happening? Um, what's the big implication of it overall?
I mean, big implication. Well, I personally don't think there's like that big of an implication. Everyone knows you could bribe your way into college. This was just a bit more blatant than the usual donate a building thing.
That's true. That's true. So,
I guess the only difference is that donating a building is legal and like lying about stuff is not. So.
hmm, yes. But in general, what do you think about the college admissions and stuff? I think this is one of the worst cases of bribery and stuff in college, but aren't there many things that could possibly happen to do with race and stuff? Say the Harvard admissions thing that apparently is supposed to discriminate against Asians at that lawsuit.
Um, Well, this is very different. I would say the closest this thing has it isn't with affirmative action, but more legacy emissions would be the closest.
That is very true.
Because really, if you look at all the people, there's like rich white people.
Mm, that's that's interesting. So what other thoughts do you have on this admission scandal in general?
I mean, it's sad, but well, it's not unexpected.
Yeah, that's exactly what I have heard of as well. Let's see. In other news, um, there's been some news with Brexit as well, where let's see, the Parliament has voted to deny Theresa May's bill again,
This is the second
but
time, guys.
extend the let's see, the deadline for Brexit, even though the EU may or may not negotiate with that.
Yeah, it only takes one EU member disagreeing for them to crash out on the 29th.
Exactly. Do you think any EU member would do that though?
Um, I heard Farage is trying to bribe Italy to do it.
Well, bribe Italy.
Well, he met the Italian interior minister, who's basically the co-prime minister, so.
Mm. So, do you think that Brexit will result in a hard Brexit that's coming up soon?
Yes. I think they're gonna leave with no deal.
They're gonna leave on the 29th with no deal, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I mean, May's going for a meaningful vote again next week on the same deal.
Mm. But but given the current, difference and difference uh, with the last vote, which was 191 votes, I think, something like
Yeah.
that. Um, and the unlikelihood of them ever voting in favor because of the Irish border stop issue. right?
Yeah.
What do you let's see, I do think that they will exit without a deal on March the 29th. And if that happens, there will be major economic disaster, I feel like, for the world.
Yep.
Mm.
Basically, the UK is shooting itself.
It might just destroy the world economy, to be honest.
Well, yeah, it
Almost.
might trigger a recession, but that one's a bit more not as certain as Britain fucking itself, more or less.
Yeah, that's true, that's true. Um, well, anyways, um, I think that, like, I think that, like, this week has had a lot of tragedies, you know? Um, this week we've had a giant massacre in New Zealand, I think it was 50 people dead, right?
Yeah, 50 people dead currently.
In, in mosque shootings in New Zealand. And some airplane, like another airplane has crashed. What would you like to talk about first, Michael? Would you like to talk about the Boeing 737 MAX 8 aircraft crash, or would you like to talk about the the death of 50 people in mosques in New Zealand?
Let's talk about the New Zealand one. I think that one's a bit more pertinent.
All right. So, Michael, would you like to give some background on this?
Well, so basically, there was this Australian guy who was a white supremacist,
Hmm.
and he went and bought a bunch of guns, and he went and shot up a mosque. Or was it two mosques? I think he had a pair of accomplices.
Yeah.
Anyways, two mosques were shot up, and then 50 people are dead now.
Mm.
Yeah.
That is very, very sad.
Meanwhile, he live streamed the whole thing on Facebook, and he was saying all these memes, like internet memes, like subscribe to PewDiePie.
Oh God. Um. So, national reaction from it in New Zealand is that they're going to tighten gun control laws, I believe, right? And that
Yes, the
starts.
Attorney General says they're gonna ban semi-autos.
Oh, they're going to ban semi-autos, so that's literally every gun in existence in New Zealand.
Well, yeah. Well,
Oh, okay, that's going to be kind of weird, actually.
that's just the first. That's just what they said. Like the general, they're probably gonna have like something a bit more specific later.
I mean, like semi-automatic rifles, sure, but I'm not sure. Like, maybe pistols? I don't know. Do you think they would?
Eh,
That one's going to
I
be
think
interesting.
because I think the guy had like a Class A license. There's like different levels of licenses in New Zealand, and so I think he had a certain type of license, and they're probably gonna restrict like semi-autos to. Actually, I don't even think hunters really use semi-autos in New Zealand, but they're probably just gonna restrict semi-autos to hunting licenses and nothing else.
Mm. I mean, like the thing about it is that I feel like a lot of what's it called? What's it called? Um, like I feel like hunters would use semi-automatic rifles. You know, like a typical use of like in let's say the U.S. right? A typical use of the AR-15 is actually to shoot bunnies, which is like kind of a weird thing to do with that thing, but apparently it is. And like people actually use semi-autos like pistols and stuff in a lot of like hunting things, so I'm not sure how it will go. Like, um, the Desert Eagle can, for example, can be used to kill bears and whatever. Although I'm not sure if it would still ban bolt action stuff, like certain rifles and whatever. Um, but yeah, I mean like if you're, but I mean like it. I feel like people could just get around that if they wanted to. Could get around the getting a gun using the hunting rule, right? So I'm not sure how effective that gun law will be, right? Because you could just say that you want to hunt some animals and get a gun, right?
I think so. The difference I think is that like there's a Category A license in New Zealand, which is the entry level gun license. It doesn't require them to register their weapon, and
Oh,
that's what they want to modify.
they probably should, because I believe the U.S. you're
Yeah,
legally required to register your weapon,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and they also want to make it so that like you can't modify a weapon for high capacity like magazines and stuff.
I mean, like this, but that literally just means buying a bigger magazine most of the time. So I'm not sure how you're gonna stop that, but
Probably something like how California has those like those like reload buttons or whatever, where like the magazine's locked and you have to like press like this button on the side really hard to get it out.
do they actually have that?
Yeah, I think California. If you want to sell in California, you do.
Oh, that's kind of weird. Um, okay. What else is there? I don't know, because people will always get around this stuff. Like, I believe that current gun manufacturers in like the US are trying to get around like this, like the bans and stuff that they currently in place using like bullpup rifles instead, where like if you just move the magazine behind the trigger finger, then then it's perfectly legal, which is like kind of weird.
It depends how they do it. And plus, I mean, with the current attitude going on in New Zealand, if a gun manufacturer try to get around with a loophole, they're probably not going to get a good reception.
Yeah, I mean like, but nobody ever checks that stuff. Like nobody in the US really has considered bullpup rifles, have they?
Well, no, well, that depends how you write the law, right? Like in Australia, like to get the type of guns that the guy had, he would have had to get like a license, hunting like license, basically.
Which I feel like wouldn't be too hard though.
No, it would have been a lot harder.
I mean, like, it's still not going to be that bad. Like, in the US, to typically get a gun, right, you have to get you first have to get the license, right? And you can bring the gun home at that point, but you can't actually carry it out with you. You have to get a concealed carry license in that case, which takes about a year to get. So, yeah. I mean,
It
like, it's,
depends how, like, I'm pretty sure Australia involves things like has a stricter background check, and there's also the fact that they probably do a psychological profile of you when they have it.
they probably do that. I mean, I don't think the US does a psychological profile. I think they just do the background check on
Yeah.
on a piece of paper, really, and you can just answer whatever you want.
Because it's likely that New Zealand is just going to copy Australia's gun laws.
I would not be surprised if they did. Um, but that still doesn't prevent like mass shootings, I feel like, even then. Because I believe Australia had a mass shooting in Sydney in 2000 something, right?
I don't think so. The only way to get like the type of guns he had for the attack in Australia would be to buy illegal weapons at a legal market. Like they don't like you cannot buy it at like an actual store in Australia. You can't find those guns.
Let's see, what else is there? So there was a mass shooting in 2018 in Australia. Um, let's see, there was a 2014 hostage crisis in which, let me see, how many people died in this one actually, the 2014 siege. Um, what else? So he executed one person in that in the hostage crisis. And someone
Uh-huh.
else died from accidental fire. So yeah, there was actually like so there are like attacks in Australia. They're just using a lot of knives or guns or like guns in rare cases.
Well, yeah. And the thing is, with a knife, it's harder to get the same amount of death counts, basically.
Um, well, I mean like this 2018 Belford massacre apparently had 5 people killed in
Yeah, but that's like very far from 50. Because with a knife, you have to get in close, and someone can tackle you. It's a lot easier to find an opening than if someone has a gun. They'll just straight up shoot you if you're going for them.
I mean like 30 people died in Japan from a knife attack, so like you can still get you can still get close to the same amount of numbers. It's not gonna stop everything from happening. So,
Yeah, but it does make the likelihood much lower.
that's true, but well, there were over like 1,000 knife attacks in Britain in the first 4 months of 2018. So, I mean, like it's still going. I mean, like I feel like the thing is that even though it may be harder to kill people, you're still not going to stop people from killing each other, even if you ban the guns. So, but I think that like this is that New Zealand will probably take a step in the right direction in limiting the availability of firearms to certain people, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This is actually quite kind of interesting. I'm just looking at all these things. There were like, there's a ton of arson attacks in Australia apparently.
Okay.
That's weird. Um, yeah. So overall though, um, do you have any closing remarks on this New Zealand shooting?
Well, I mean, it's sad, but when you mark the trajectory of like white supremacism, it does seem to be going up in recent years.
Mm. And
So we're likely going to see more of these type of attacks in the future.
well, like, why do you believe that there's like this increase in white supremacism? Really?
Why? I mean, there's the perceived fear that Muslims are moving to the West and destroying Western civilization. There's the fear that the country is moving in a more non-white direction, I suppose. And then there's the whole internet radicalization.
Yeah. I think part of it too is just that like a lot of people just don't like immigrants coming in as well.
Yeah.
So that might be part of it as well. Um, anyways, I think that'll be good for that topic. Let's talk about the 737 MAX 8 crash. So I believe about a week ago, right, there was a crash an Ethiopian Airlines flight that smashed to the ground about a few minutes after takeoff from um, an airport. I believe it was leaving from Kenya and going to Ethiopia, correct?
Yes, I think so.
So the main thing that's happened so far is that the entire 737 MAX 8 fleet's been grounded, and MAX 9's
Yep.
been grounded in some countries. And so, well, I think the main thing to touch on is that, like, do you think that the MAX 8 is safe?
Well, currently doesn't look like it.
Hmm. Yeah. One of the things that I've seen so far is that I've studied a lot of air crash investigations so far, and it kind of mirrors something that's happened to the 737 in the past. So the
The
original
Lion Air crash?
no, this is even different. So about 30 years ago, right, 1980s. Um, let's see, the 737. Let's see, original and classic editions, which is like the 100, 200, 300, 400, and 500 versions of this plane, had a rudder hardware failure in them. So basically, what would happen is that the rudder would be locked in one position, and the plane would spiral out of control and smash to the ground. And I believe this caused the crash of a United Airlines flight and a U.S. Airways flight. And ironically, like it's the same sort of time span, right? Um, and yet the planes weren't grounded from it, which is like I find, and like for me when I'm looking at like the current groundings, I feel like it's a little bit of an overreaction to like what's actually happened because there's so many like flights in this, there's so many flights with the plane that happen every day, and it's so rare to have the air crash that I feel like it's kind of unjustified to have it grounded. The amount of like money that these companies are losing with the grounding and the amount of delayed flights for people or canceled flights in that for that matter, I feel like is a lot more impactful than the grounding.
Well, first of all, I think the first thing you should be thinking about is the safety of passengers and flight attendants and pilots rather than companies' bottom lines. But this is what the second crash in 5 months, and the plane's been in service for less than 2 years. And the recent satellite footage that they're saying is that the two have basically the same flight path before they crashed, the same like type of, well, the same pattern. And then you have like all the reports of like U.S. pilots like complaining about issues with the plane in like a database.
Well, if you're following precedent though, you have to remember that the world did not ground the 737 when they had issues like this in the past. Which is so I find this quite strange in a way because you're basically flying this aircraft, right? That is considered very safe by all standards. Like these two crashes, I think let's see, because Boeing's already been working on a fix for these, so I feel like you could still fly these aircraft just fine. And
Well,
the
I mean,
other
the
thing
fact
that
that Boeing's making a fix for it suggests that there is an issue.
Well, and then there's also another issue, right? The pilots on these planes were very, very inexperienced overall. The captain only had about 9,000 hours in the aircraft, which is literally nothing. The co-pilot had about 200 hours. And now, if you want to make a comparison for this, let's see. Most pilots that have flied that are considered like rookies, somewhat experienced, have over 30,000 hours in the air. All right, these people were not very experienced pilots. And the thing about Indonesia is that they've about the Lion Air crash is that the entire like Indonesian airspace, like all those planes in the all those companies that fly those planes, right, are considered unsafe by many different organizations, including the EU. The entire EU airspace like bans any Indonesian aircraft besides I believe Garuda's planes from flying into there because they're considered so unsafe and that the pilots are very, very like overall incompetent. So I think part of it also has to do with pilot error in this case. We'll have to figure out what happens and see what's going on. But I think that there is some pilot reaction that has failed it.
No,
In the
part of the thing
past,
is that, like, Boeing marketed this as just an upgrade of the 737, so that pilots they need to be recertified for a new plane. But they didn't tell pilots about the whole MCAS system,
but the
so
thing
they
is that
didn't
we
know to
don't
turn it
know.
off.
But we don't know if the MCIS system has done anything to crash the plane. We don't know that yet. We'll have to figure that out in the actual accident report. This is only speculation, and we haven't figured out anything about that. So,
Yeah, but it's currently looking probable that's MCAS.
but that's the thing. See, you can't ground the aircraft over speculation. That's a very, very bad idea. We'll see what happens, but given past incidents with aircraft, a lot of things that have happened in aircraft in the recent years have not been with the technological faults of the aircraft, but with pilot error. The 777 that crashed at San Francisco was all pilot error due to a lack of communication due to a lack of interpreting information with the system. The Air France crash into the Atlantic Ocean was also due to pilot error, due to a lack of communication with the system. And the thing is that, the MCAS system is, even if it was to have that, should have redundant systems in it. For example, if you were, let me, let me think for a second, but the thing about the systems that they're all redundant with each other. You're not allowed to have a system work on one independently. And and even if that were to happen, there's two systems that are meant to correct it. You see, for example, the entire point of the crash with the Air France flight was that is that one of the pilot's pitot tubes got blocked. Pitot tube measures airspeed, so so when that happened, the autopilot automatically shuts off and lets the pilots deal with it. So the co-pilot pulled up on the stick for that flight, and the plane stalled out and crashed, even though, there's backup instruments to measure the airspeed correctly. And when the captain came in, he recognized this, but it was too late and the plane and crashed. So there's got to be something else that happened with the aircraft itself. No air crash has ever happened in which there's only one reason why the plane crashed. It's either due to like an instrument failure in which the pilot misjudged some aspect of the aircraft, right? They weren't, they didn't take manual control of it and the plane crashed. Or the pilots were just stupid in general and then just smashed the plane into a mountain for some stupid reason.
Well, okay, but I don't think you can just say that this is because the pilot is an idiot, because you don't know if the pilot was an idiot or not.
Well, you can say that they're inexperienced at least, so that could have contributed to it.
Well, yes, but they didn't say that what they were hearing over the radio was basically that they were trying to pull the plane up, but because yeah, they were trying to pull the plane up, but it wouldn't do it because MCAS was pitching it down supposedly.
We'll have to see about that one. We don't know, but I can see that system having an effect if there is no manual control given over to the pilots. But we'll have to see with it, because the 737 really is just the max version is really just an upgrade of the current 737. The only
Well, no, they
diff
stuffed a bigger engine in there and they moved the whole wing forward because otherwise it wouldn't fit, and which causes the plane to have a bigger tendency to pitch up, which is why they added MCAS to pitch it back down. The issue is that this is probably both planes happen because they're taking off, right? So it's probably an issue where you're trying to pitch the plane up to take off, and MCAS doesn't know you're taking off, so then it tries to pitch back down.
I'm assuming that the MCAS has to deal with the airspeed of the aircraft and the current pitch of it. It might be just because the MCAS might be wanting to pitch down due to the angle of attack that the aircraft is going up at as well. But we'll have to see what the let's see what comes back from that. But I do believe that the 737 itself should be a fairly safe aircraft to fly, considering that there have been so many accidents like this in the past, and yet no aircraft has really been grounded over such things. Like even the DC-10 with a malfunctioning cargo door, which blew apart aircrafts in midair, wasn't grounded after 3 crashes. So, I mean, I feel like it might be an overreaction on the parts of some.
Well, perhaps, but even if you didn't ground it, people weren't willing to fly on the planes anymore.
Uh, that's not necessarily true, but like, because even after the DC-10 crashes, people still flew on those aircraft. It's not like everyone's gonna stop taking them.
Yeah, but well, after this one, people were checking what their flights were to see if they were on a max 8 or not.
Yeah, that's true, but I do think that we'll see what the results come back to. I don't. I do think that the 737 MAX 8 still is a safe aircraft. I mean, the basic design of the aircraft is still fundamentally the same as the regular 737. The only difference would be the engines, which the only like real big difference in the aircraft is that they got different engines in there, and that they raised the aircraft's landing gear by like a few feet to accommodate them, and moved the wings just a little bit.
Yeah, that's what causes the plane to have a bigger tendency to pitch up, though.
Yeah, but there's a lot of planes that have different flight characteristics like that. And the thing about it is that most of these pilots who fly them are either new or should have been trained on the original 737. So,
No, they
it's
probably were like trained on the original 737 and then just transferred to the Max 8.
yeah, there's still let's see, but the transfer to the Max 8, you still need to go through a retraining process.
No, you
Although
don't. That's
no,
that's how Boeing does pitched it. You don't have to recertify for the Max 8.
no, you definitely have to. There's no way. Because they're using different flight controls for that. You have to recertify them within like a 20. They have to go through flight training for about 20 hours.
Let me see.
Because even the A320 has that sort of thing. Because they upgraded it to the Neo and they still have to retrain them on that.
Um, yeah, okay, honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, because the thing about it is that if you've ever looked at the flight deck of a 737 MAX 8, compared it to the flight deck of a 737, the avionics itself are different. What they've done is they've taken much of the 787's avionics, right? Like the
Yeah,
layout of it, and put it into the 737 MAX's cockpit, which means that you're gonna have to be retrained on the avionics positions and stuff. It doesn't matter what happens right there. You have to be retrained. Every aircraft that you get switched to will have to do that. Even though the 787 and the 777 both have the same flight deck configuration as of right now, you still need to be retrained on that aircraft for about 20 hours to switch between the two because of the different characteristics of flying it.
yeah,
So it's not like these pilots were like completely incompetent on it, but I mean, that's part of the reason. Um, I wouldn't. I do think that like part of it will probably come down to pilot error in these two crashes, but I do think that it may possibly be to the fault of Boeing in some cases with the MCAS system. We'll have to see in the full report, and I think that currently the media is over speculating on it. Um, like let's see, saying that the MCAS system is like super. What's it called? I feel like the MCAS system is they're overreacting to like how big an issue the MCAS system is. Um, because you're far more likely to have your plane crashed from a pitot tube malfunction than this, which would be far more devastating in most cases. So I'm not sure um, how bad this would really be overall, but we'll see. Anyways, I think that will wrap it up for today. This has been your host Harrison, and also your co-host Michael, and I think this is where we'll be cutting it off. Bye bye.
But